Senator, thank you. I know it's been a week, as they say. I just want to play one piece of sound for you from Chairman Nadler and Speaker Pelosi about the police reform bill first.
This is not the time for half measures. It's not the time for further study. It's not the time for sham fake reform. The Senate bill is sham fake reform.
When we pass this bill, the Senate will have a choice to honor George Floyd's life or to do nothing.
Senator, with the sting of the rejection of by the Democrats a couple of days behind you now, how are you? Yes. How did you wake up this morning feeling about this police reform effort?
Well, I think our effort was a sincere effort, authentic effort, based on true discussions with African-American leaders and law enforcement. We do not need a binary choice between law enforcement and communities of color. We have to get something done. We gave the public what they asked for, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation. And the fact is that the Democrats, they rejected the process of having amendments on the floor so the American people could see how they voted. They rejected not 5 amendments, not 10 amendments, but Dana, they rejected 20 amendments. They said they had 20 issues with the bill. So I said, you can have an issue with every single issue you have on the bill. And if you can get the votes, we'll add it to it. They said no, and they literally walked out. That tells me that their issue is not police reform. Their issue is not helping the kids in the poorest neighborhoods. Their issue is a political issue, bringing November before July so that they, for the next 4 months, have a chance to campaign on police reform without actually solving the issues around police reform. That, to me, is devastating for the young souls in our country.
And I know that you speak from the heart when you're on the floor. You speak without notes. This is something that you obviously truly believe in. Knowing that the Democrats will pass their bill in the House because they have the majority there, when it comes over to the Senate, what do you anticipate will happen then? And how will you use your voice to defend Republicans on this going into the 2020 election?
You know, yesterday, Dana, I had an opportunity to have a conversation with a brother of one of the victims who lost his life to police shooting him. And I talked to the guy for about 25, 30 minutes. And the conclusion of the conversation was simply this. He said, you mean to tell me that that's a local issue? Like the city could have done something about this already? Dana, what we're doing in Congress is taking the responsibility that Minneapolis, Cleveland, Detroit, and so many other liberal Democrat-run cities has refused to deal with the underlying issue. So when the bill comes over, we'll have an opportunity, from my perspective, to have each piece of the pie divided, and then we could go to the floor and frankly offer an individual part of the bill, like the chokehold that we all agree on. I'll add the carotid to it and give the Democrats a chance to vote for it. We could do the same thing. Last night, we passed the commission on studying black men and black boys as part of the bill. Rubio led that charge. We passed that last night. I would be happy to break down the piece of legislation that I have and then get each piece passed based on a bipartisan consensus to move forward.
I'm going to put away my notes. I was going to ask you about one of the statute issues, but I want to ask you this.
Sure.
I've read a lot about your mom and how she raised you and your brother and how proud she is of you.
Yes.
And I think about, you as a young man, you as a boy, you as a young man, and now you're a senator. You've gone through what you've gone through this week. When you talk to your mom, how do you think she sees you in this moment and possibly in possibly bigger roles going forward?
You know, my mother's really proud of where we are. She deserves a lot of credit. You know, so many kids growing up in the poorest neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods, believe that either drugs, football or athletics or entertainment, they're the only ways out in America to get into the middle class or to achieve wealth. She realized early on that every single child in the neighborhood need more examples of work. And she wanted to make sure in her household dignity in work was a part of the process. It was in our DNA. And so she's very proud of what she was able to accomplish through her sons. My brother was a command sergeant major, top 1% of the non-commissioned officers in the United States Army, 32 years. I have not achieved his level of success. I'm only a senator. We put command sergeant majors way above senators in the Scott household. But the truth of the matter is, what she always said was that you have to shoot for the moon. And even if you miss, you'll be among the stars. What she was saying was, Timmy, as she calls me, Timmy, don't look around you, look within you. And a part of the challenge that we have with this current debate is we're putting all the responsibility, all the burden, all of the cards in someone else's hands. That is the wrong way to move the poorest Americans forward. We need to deal with racism because it's an issue. It is not the issue. And it's one of the things my mother instinctively knew, that if we can blame everybody else for where we are, we never, ever get to move forward. But if we can take the responsibility to do everything in our power to control our future, we get to move forward. And as I think about the debate,
so can I
it's one of the reasons why I've said, yes.
Can I ask you then, when it comes to the Democrats on those issues in terms of education, in terms of school choice, or things that they could do at the local level, are they not doing enough?
They haven't even started the conversation. This country, we spend $770 billion on public education. We have the poorest kids with the lowest performance. Think about this. In Detroit, one of the numbers in the last 5 years, in reading, science, and math, the numbers were under 20% for 2 out of the 3 categories for black kids. On average in this nation, white kids are in the 70 percentile. Just think of the chasm between the teens and the 70s. But in New York City, there is a lady named Eva Moskowitz who runs the Success Academy, public charter schools. She gets less than, I think it's half the money that the public schools in New York City gets. What's the performance of her kids? 81% minority. Their scores are in the 70 percentile range. In other words, she is proving that the poorest kids in New York City, given the right environment for less money, produces equal to or better results than other kids around the state of New York. We are not having a problem based simply on resources. We're not having a problem based on zip codes. We are having a problem based on imagination. We're having a problem based on the circumstances that the adults find the kids, not that the kids find themselves. So if we teach to where we want them to go, as opposed to dumbing it down, we'd get high-performing students and high-performing schools in the poor zip codes. We've got a guy in Charleston, Ben Navarro, who started a small school. All of the parents make less than $30,000, 95% free lunch. And literally, his kids are in the top 20% around the country in 2 years. We can do it, but if you build a school system for adults and teachers' unions defend it, instead of for kids where they have no union to defend them, and that is why we produce the low levels in education, which then has a correlation to the levels of employment, which then has a correlation to the levels of income, and that has a correlation to the wealth, because you have to have a strong, healthy income to create a household, which creates a home, and that home, the benefit of the home is that the profit in the home is the chasm between the haves and the have-nots in this country. 41% home ownership in the African-American community, 70% in the white community. We can close that gap, and it starts with education, not with police reform. It starts with education. And police reform, by and large, by the way, is more of a local issue than it is a federal issue. The Democrat bill in the House and the Senate bill, we give incentives to local governments to do certain things because we don't control local law enforcement. The Minneapolis can deal with chokeholds, duty to intervene, escalation training, bias training. All those tools are already in the local hands.
Last question for you. Do you remain a hopeful person after this week?
Oh my goodness. I am more hopeful today than I was at the beginning of the week. I'm completely convinced that Proverbs 29:18, that without a vision people perish, to cast off restraint. Give kids the vision, and they will exceed our wildest imaginations for them. The best is yet to come. There's no doubt about that.
Well, TGIF that we had you on the show today to end us on that high note. Thank you, Senator Tim Scott.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.